one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, was never found. No archaeological evidence confirms it ever existed. Yet what if the Hanging Gardens of Babylon weren't destroyed by earthquake or conquest, but instead stand today as humanity's oldest continuously maintained monument? Imagine standing at the base of 7 massive terraces rising 300 feet into the Iraqi sky, each level bursting with vegetation so lush it seems impossible in the desert heat. Water cascades down stone channels carved 25 centuries ago, still flowing from the Euphrates through engineering that predates Roman aqueducts by 300 years. The gardens that ancient writers called the most beautiful human creation would today dwarf every botanical garden on Earth. But here's what historians rarely tell you. If the gardens survived, they wouldn't just be a tourist attraction. Their continuous existence would have fundamentally altered the trajectory of Persian, Islamic, and modern Middle Eastern civilization, changing the world order as we know it. Around 600 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar II ruled the most powerful empire on Earth from Babylon. According to legend, he built the gardens for his Median wife Amydes, who missed the green mountains of her homeland. Ancient writers described something that defied logic: ascending terraces supported by vaulted archways, each level planted with trees that shouldn't survive in Mesopotamian heat. The irrigation system was the real marvel. A chain pump system lifting water from the Euphrates over 75 feet vertically, using technology centuries ahead of its time. Greek historians who visited called it Thembulon Kremastos, the Hanging Garden. But here's the mystery: Babylonian records never mention it. No cuneiform tablet describes its construction. Archaeological excavations have found nothing. Most historians now believe the gardens were either mythical, located elsewhere, or destroyed so completely that even their foundations vanished. In our timeline, the gardens became legend. But consider this: what if they were real, and what if one critical event changed everything? What if the catastrophic earthquake of 353 BCE simply never happened? The year is 353 BCE. In our timeline, a massive earthquake struck the region, likely destroying whatever structures inspired the garden legends. But imagine the earth doesn't shake that day. The garden's revolutionary engineering, those vaulted arches, the hydraulic screws, the lead-line terraces preventing water seepage, all survive intact. More critically, the Persian administrators who conquered Babylon in 539 BCE saw the gardens not as an enemy monument to destroy, but as a symbol of power to preserve. Cyrus the Great declared them protected, a gesture of respect to conquered peoples that became Persian imperial policy. When Alexander the Great reached Babylon in 331 BCE, he didn't just admire the gardens. He made them his capital's centerpiece. Instead of dying in Babylon's palace at 32, imagine Alexander survives his fever and makes the gardens the symbolic heart of his empire. The Ptolemies, Seleucids, and later Romans compete to maintain them. Each dynasty enhances them. Each civilization adds its botanical knowledge. By the Islamic Golden Age, the gardens aren't a ruin. They're humanity's living library of agricultural science. Under Persian stewardship, the gardens become something unprecedented, a declaration that empire means preservation, not destruction. The Achaemenids station permanent gardeners, specialists who develop grafting techniques centuries early. They introduce plants from India, from the steppes, from Egypt. The gardens transform into the world's first true botanical research center. When Alexander arrives, he's so moved that he marries Roxana in a ceremony held on the third terrace, establishing a precedent: the gardens as neutral sacred ground. The Seleucid dynasty that follows doesn't just maintain them, they expand. They add an 8th terrace. They improve the irrigation system using Archimedes' screw technology decades before it appears in Alexandria. Scholars from across the Hellenistic world travel to Babylon not for libraries, but for living knowledge. Medical researchers study plant properties. Agricultural innovations born here spread throughout the Mediterranean. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder visits in 55 CE and writes, "Here grows the sum of Earth's botanical wisdom, preserved by every empire wise enough to recognize that some creations transcend conquest." The gardens become the ancient world's Geneva, politically neutral, scientifically invaluable. When Islamic armies reach Babylon in 637 CE, they find gardens that have stood for 1,300 years. The Abbasid Caliphate, establishing Baghdad just 50 miles north, sees opportunity. Caliph al-Mansur decrees the gardens a waqf, an inalienable religious endowment for scientific study. They become the agricultural arm of the House of Wisdom. This is where Ibn al-Awam's revolution in farming begins. This is where advanced irrigation techniques are perfected before spreading to Al-Andalus and eventually Renaissance Europe. The four-field crop rotation system, developed here 3 centuries before appearing in medieval Europe. By 900 CE, the gardens house over 3,000 plant species from 3 continents. Scholars developed the concept of botanical taxonomy 500 years before Linnaeus. The garden's library contains agricultural treatises in Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Sanskrit. When crusaders sack other cities, they deliberately avoid Babylon. Even enemies recognize the garden's transcendent value. The Mongol invasion of 1258 that devastates Baghdad. Hulagu Khan's botanist advisors convince him to spare the gardens. They're too valuable to lose. Think about that. An agricultural site so critical it survives the Mongol conquests. Fast forward to the Ottoman period. The gardens become a symbol of Islamic scientific heritage the Ottomans aggressively protect. When European botanists arrive in the 1700s, they're stunned. Carl Linnaeus himself visits in 1748, spending 6 months cataloging species found nowhere else. His taxonomic system is refined here, incorporating naming conventions from Arabic botanical traditions. The gardens survive World War I because both British and Ottoman forces declare them off-limits. One of history's few gentlemen's agreements actually honored. During the British Mandate, the League of Nations designates them humanity's first World Heritage Site in 1924, decades before UNESCO exists. The Kingdom of Iraq, gaining independence in 1932, makes the gardens their national symbol. Here's where it gets interesting. Oil wealth discovered in 1938 doesn't just fund armies, it funds the garden's expansion. Modern irrigation, climate control systems, research laboratories built beneath the ancient terraces. By 1960, the hanging gardens cover 12 acres and employ 3,000 people. They're simultaneously an ancient monument, a working research institution, and a symbol that Iraq's identity transcends any single religion or empire. Then comes 1991, Operation Desert Storm. In our timeline, bombs fell on Baghdad and Babylon's ruins were damaged by military operations. But in this timeline, the gardens become the world's most protected target. Both coalition forces and Iraqi military establish them as a no-strike zone. International pressure is immense, but it's more than that. Military planners on both sides realize the propaganda nightmare of destroying 25 centuries of continuous human achievement. Saddam Hussein, despite his brutality, recognizes the garden's value as proof of Iraqi civilization's depth. He pours resources into protection. Coalition planners route all bombing runs away from the site. It becomes one of the conflict's strangest elements, both sides protecting the same place. CNN broadcasts live from the gardens during the war, showing ancient and modern Iraq coexisting. The images are powerful, perhaps too powerful. When the 2003 invasion looms, international pressure centers on one demand: establish the gardens as an international protectorate immediately. The UN Security Council passes a unanimous resolution. The gardens become sovereign neutral territory administered by UNESCO, the first place on Earth to exist outside national jurisdiction. Today, in this alternate 2024, the Hanging Gardens stand as Earth's oldest continuously operating institution, 2,500 years without interruption. The research conducted here has genuine global impact. The garden's seed bank contains genetic lineages of wheat, barley, and fruit trees dating back to Babylonian times, crops lost everywhere else. When climate change threatens modern agriculture, researchers here have ancestors of drought-resistant varieties developed 2 millennia ago. The gardens have become the world's primary center for studying long-term plant cultivation and climate adaptation. Over 400 PhD students from 60 nations conduct research here annually. But there's something deeper. The gardens represent proof that human achievement can transcend empire, religion, war, and ideology. Every civilization that controlled them chose preservation over ego. In our fractured world, they stand as evidence that some things are genuinely universal. The gardens employ 12,000 people. Iraqis, yes, but also Persians, Kurds, Arabs, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Yazidis. It's the Middle East's largest genuinely multicultural institution. And here's the remarkable thing. Within the garden's boundaries, ancient law still applies. The Babylonian concept of sacred ground means it's one of the world's few places where ancient and modern legal systems overlap. But what does their survival change about the world? Everything and nothing. The Middle East still experiences conflict, but there's one inviolable point of stability. The gardens serve as neutral ground for negotiations 27 times between 1948 and 2024. The Camp David Accords, negotiated partially at the gardens in 1977. The Abraham Accords, finalized there in 2020. There's something about walking through living proof of Persian, Greek, Roman, Islamic, and modern cooperation that changes diplomatic calculations. Economically, Iraq's identity centers less on oil and more on scientific heritage. The gardens generate $17 billion annually in research value, tourism, and agricultural patents. Iraqi nationalism is less militaristic, more focused on cultural leadership. The gardens provide an alternative narrative, Iraq as civilization's cradle and current guardian. Iran and Iraq maintain better relations because the gardens represent shared Persian Mesopotamian heritage. Kurdish autonomy is less contentious because the gardens employ Kurds at all levels. Israel and Arab states communicate through garden-sponsored agricultural conferences. The gardens won't prevent all conflict, but they create one space where shared human heritage matters more than differences. And perhaps that's the most profound what if of all. Stand with me now on the 7th terrace as sunset paints the Euphrates gold. Below, 2,500 years of continuous human effort grows, blooms, and bears fruit. The gardens that shouldn't have survived. But did? Were they real in our timeline? We may never know. But this thought experiment reveals something true. What we choose to preserve defines us more than what we build. Every empire that controlled the gardens faced the same choice: glorify ourselves or honor what came before. In this timeline, they chose honor. The gardens remind us that some human achievements transcend the civilizations that create them. They become humanity's achievement. In our real world, we've lost so much. The Library of Alexandria burned. The Buddhas of Bamiyan were destroyed. Palmyra was damaged. We live in the timeline where impermanence won. But perhaps asking, what if the gardens survived, is really asking something else. What will we choose to preserve? What are we building now that should still stand 25 centuries forward? The hanging gardens, real or imagined, exist in our minds as possibility. And sometimes, possibility is more powerful than fact. What gardens are you building that might outlast empires?